It started like any ordinary day, until she met someone she was never supposed to meet. The night her world fell apart, it rained as if the sky itself could not bear to watch. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and heartbreak, and as she stood there alone, staring at the cold white tiles beneath her trembling feet, she felt something inside her collapse forever. She had believed in forever once. She had believed in promises. But in a single breath, life had rewritten her story without asking for permission. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet miracles that come when we least expect them, take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs hope. Comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even broken hearts can find their way home. Her name was Ariba Khan, and at 28 she had already buried more dreams than most people twice her age. Just 6 months earlier, she had been planning a wedding, carefully choosing soft pastel decorations and imagining a small garden ceremony filled with laughter. She had trusted a man who spoke about forever as if it were guaranteed, but forever dissolved the day she discovered he had built another life behind her back, one that didn't include her. The betrayal wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet and calculated, like a slow poison that spread through her veins long after she found out. When her father collapsed from a sudden heart attack weeks later, the pain felt almost cruelly synchronized. She blamed herself for the stress in the house, for the arguments, for the tension that had settled like dust in every corner of their small apartment. She carried guilt the way some people carry handbags, close to the chest and impossible to set down. After the funeral, the house felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. Her mother moved like a shadow, silent and distant, and Ariba took on the role of strength even though she felt hollow inside. She returned to her job at a modest publishing house in Lahore, determined to focus on something steady and predictable. Words had always been her refuge. Books didn't lie, stories didn't cheat, paper didn't betray. Her days became mechanical. She woke early, tied her long dark hair into a simple ponytail, dressed in neutral shalwar kameez, and avoided mirrors. She edited manuscripts with clinical precision, red pen moving across pages while her own life remained unwritten. She stopped accepting invitations from friends. Weddings were unbearable, laughter too loud, happiness too sharp. She convinced herself she no longer believed in love. It was safer that way. Then came the assignment she didn't want. The publishing house had signed a new author, a 32-year-old writer named Saad Mirza, whose manuscript was described as raw, painfully honest, and impossible to ignore. Her boss insisted she was the only editor capable of handling something so emotionally layered. She almost refused. She didn't want raw. She didn't want honest. She wanted distance. The first time she saw him, he was sitting in the conference room by the window, sunlight outlining his broad shoulders. He wasn't what she expected. He wore a simple navy kurta, sleeves rolled up to reveal ink-stained fingers. His hair was slightly unkempt, as if he had run his hands through it too many times. There was something quiet about him, not intimidating but observant. His eyes, dark and steady, carried a kind of depth that made her uncomfortable. She avoided looking at him directly during their initial meeting, focusing instead on the manuscript between them. But when he spoke about his story, about grief, about losing his younger sister in a car accident, about the silence that followed, something inside her shifted. He didn't dramatize his pain. He simply acknowledged it. It existed. It changed him. And he survived it. As weeks passed, their professional meetings grew longer. They discussed character arcs, emotional pacing, and narrative tension. But beneath the technical conversations, something softer began to form. She found herself anticipating his emails, noticing the careful way he chose his words, the patience with which he listened to her suggestions. He never dismissed her perspective. Instead, he thanked her, as if she were giving him something precious. One evening, as they worked late in the office, the power went out during a sudden storm. The building fell into darkness, and the city outside glowed faintly through rain-streaked windows. She felt that old panic rise in her chest, the memory of hospital corridors, of loss. But Saad didn't rush to fill the silence. He simply stood beside her, calm and steady, and spoke softly about how storms pass, even when they feel endless. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. There was no pressure in his tone, no attempt to rescue or fix her, just presence. She hated that it made her feel safe. Safety had once betrayed her, safety had once promised forever. So she pulled back. She limited their conversations strictly to work. She stopped responding to his messages outside office hours. She convinced herself that whatever warmth she felt was temporary, a trick of proximity and shared vulnerability. But life has a way of dismantling the walls we build with such care. Her mother fell ill one winter morning, fainting in the kitchen. Ariba rushed her to the hospital, hands shaking as memories of her father flooded back. She didn't tell anyone at work. She didn't want sympathy. She didn't want anyone to see her unravel. Yet somehow Saad found out. Perhaps it was the unanswered emails. Perhaps it was instinct. When she stepped into the hospital waiting area hours later, exhausted and frightened, she saw him sitting there with 2 cups of tea in his hands. He didn't ask intrusive questions. He didn't offer dramatic reassurances. He simply handed her the tea and sat beside her, shoulder close but not touching. For the first time in months, she let herself cry. Not the silent, controlled tears she had mastered, but deep, trembling sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for her father, for her broken engagement, for the version of herself who once believed love was simple, and he stayed. Through every tear, every breath, every moment of silence he stayed. Her mother recovered slowly, and life began to steady again. But something in Ariba had shifted. She could no longer pretend she felt nothing. She began noticing the way Saad laughed quietly at his own awkward jokes, the way he remembered small details about her, how she disliked overly sweet tea, how she preferred window seats, how she always carried a notebook even when she didn't need it. Still, fear lingered. One evening, as they walked out of the office together, she finally confronted it. She told him, not in dramatic words but in a quiet, almost detached tone, that she didn't believe in love anymore, that she wasn't capable of trusting someone with her heart, that she was too tired to risk breaking again. He didn't argue. He didn't promise grand gestures. He simply told her that love isn't about guarantees. It's about choosing to stay, even when staying is difficult. It's about patience, about earning trust slowly, about showing up. And then he gave her space. Days turned into weeks. He didn't push. He didn't demand clarity. He continued being present, consistent, respectful. He brought her drafts with thoughtful revisions. He asked about her mother's health. He treated her not as a fragile heart to rescue, but as a strong woman worthy of steady love. The realization crept up on her one quiet afternoon as she watched him through the glass wall of the conference room, completely absorbed in editing a paragraph she had suggested rewriting. There was no performance in him, no manipulation, just sincerity. She hadn't seen this love coming because it wasn't loud. It didn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic confessions. It arrived with tea in hospital waiting rooms, with patience in storms, with silence that felt safe instead of empty. The day she finally allowed herself to believe, it was spring. The city was blooming again, as if determined to prove that renewal was possible. She invited him to walk through a small park near her home, where children played and elderly couples sat on worn wooden benches. The air smelled of fresh grass and distant jasmine. She told him she was scared, that loving him meant risking everything she had carefully rebuilt, that she didn't know if she was strong enough to survive another heartbreak. And for the first time, she didn't run from her feelings. He looked at her not with urgency, but with quiet certainty. In that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. Love is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite it. She chose him. Not because he promised forever, not because he filled the emptiness inside her, but because he respected her scars and never tried to erase them, because he understood grief without being consumed by it, because he stayed, and in choosing him, she chose herself again. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment right now to comment the word hope below. Let us know you're still believing in second chances. A year later, their lives looked different, but not in a fairy tale way. There were still arguments about small things, still moments of doubt, Still days when grief resurfaced unexpectedly. But there was also laughter in the kitchen, shared cups of tea on rainy evenings, and hands reaching for each other in the dark without hesitation. On the anniversary of her father's passing, she stood once again in a hospital corridor, not as a grieving daughter, but as a volunteer reading to patients who had no visitors. Saad stood nearby, organizing donated books. She realized then how far she had come. The corridor no longer felt like the end of her story. It felt like a chapter she had survived. She didn't see this love coming because she was too busy guarding her broken pieces. But sometimes, love doesn't knock loudly. It waits patiently at the door, proving itself not through words, but through presence. And in the quiet spaces between heartbreak and healing, she found something stronger than the love she had lost. She found a love that chose her every single day. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that healing is possible and that love can return in the most unexpected ways, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories that warm the heart. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who might be silently struggling. Because somewhere out there, someone who has stopped believing in love might just need this reminder. Sometimes the love you never saw coming is the one that stays.